Hi, this is Kara Swisher, and I want to talk to you about my new podcast for the New York Times called Sway. If you want to know what people who hold power in our world are really all about, you need to hear how they answer the tough questions. And that is my specialty. And although it might get messy, as it always does, it's also going to be really fun. You can get Sway wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are available Mondays and Thursdays.
To the Rutgers Rant. I'm Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media, joined as always by Keith Sargent, James Cratch. Fellas, I was thinking about this as we were getting started this week. I don't know if Rutgers beating Purdue was the biggest Big Ten win in Rutgers history. I know there's only 9 of them, so you don't have a long list to pick from. But certainly for me, it's got to be the most surprising. And I don't know how you felt about this, but when this game was at halftime, Rutgers is down 10, Purdue's moving the ball at will. I mean, I thought there was no chance that this was going to be a competitive game in the second half, much less a game that Rutgers would win. And instead, what you saw was just an incredible job of coaching on offense, a defense that made, just a few of the big plays that you needed, and Rutgers imposing its will. That is something that this program, Cratch, has not done in years. A physical, it just completely took over the game physically.
I wrote in the film review, and I mean this in the best way possible. It's kind of still hard for me to believe that Rutgers won that game, just because the way the game was going in the first half, the way the defense kind of suddenly buttoned everything down, made big plays. It helped that obviously they didn't have to play much in the fourth quarter. I also think the offense Rutgers ran with Johnny Lange in the second half, that's something that, if you look at it on paper, shouldn't work as well as it did for as long as it did. It was a very limited kind of basic offense. They kept imposing their will. Purdue could not stop it. So just an incredible win. I don't know if it's as important as beating Michigan, just because of the moment and the fact Michigan's helmet looks a little bit different, a little sexier through the ages than Purdue's does, and Michigan is Michigan. Just a tremendous achievement, by far the biggest achievement of Greg Schiano 2.0.
Right. And Sarge, when you think about, I think about the games at the end of a couple of years ago where Michigan State had the ball for like 40 minutes and Rutgers ran like 32 offensive plays. And, and that second half was kind of the same way. I didn't realize this until I think Greg Schiano said it, but Purdue had 3 plays in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's incredible. That just speaks to, an offense that just as we mentioned, Johnny Langan getting the ball up the middle, just continuing to dominate that way.
Yeah, it reminded me, actually, I was trying to think of games that it reminded me from the previous Schiano era. It reminded me of the Vanderbilt game back in 2004, where
wow, you're going deep now.
Rutgers wasn't great that year. They ended up, they might have actually gone to a bowl game if it wasn't for that car accident, right, for major injury. But the Vanderbilt game, they were losing that game. Jay Cutler was the Vanderbilt quarterback. It was on the road, and they ended up winning 37-34. Kind of reminded me of that game. A year where it might have been a little bit like 1 year before they really had a breakthrough. You're right. I mean, completely surprised the way they were able to do it too. The way they were, I'm sure we'll talk about this, but the way they were able to adapt on the fly, pass off to Sean Gleason. I wrote about the offense a week ago. It's really amazing, how they've been able to transform it.
Right. All right. I thought this game is worth addressing a little more. I thought we'd each pick one single person player who you thought was most responsible for this, or an unsung hero. I'm going to go straight in with Gleason. Sorry, you've been there having kids. And I realize it's his third kid, so it's a little different than your first or your second kid. His wife gives birth at 10:30 p.m. on Friday night. I was not a functional human being in that situation for at least 72 hours. I mean, I could barely change a diaper. I could barely hold the camera up to take a picture of my newborn, much less the idea you're going to get on the plane, fly to West Lafayette, Indiana. I know he flies it's a private jet, but still, I mean, it's not an easy trip to get to Purdue, to coach this game. And I coach it, but then, you're running on adrenaline, you're down 10 points, you don't have your starting quarterback, to come up with something that works, by far, I think that is, this guy, if he's not in the running for assistant coach of the year, coordinator of the year in Big Ten, you certainly have to put him in there now. Cratch, who do you got? Give me one person who sticks out in that game that if you're watching the film, you said, wow.
It's one play for me, and it's a play that I wrote about in the film review. I just didn't miss, in the flow of the game on Saturday. That Avery Young stop where he had that screen tackle for a 3-yard loss, that was, I think, really a critical moment in the game just because, I think it was 34-30 at that point. Purdue is on the move. They get the long kickoff return. They have the big play from Plummer to Bell. And it just seemed when they blew up that screen, which is something that Purdue had a lot of success with earlier in the game, it just took the air out of it. Their whole offense got knocked out of rhythm. 2 incomplete passes. They have to punt. Obviously, Rutgers has the long drive, kicks the field goal. I thought that was really kind of a pivotal moment in the game. But also Mohamed Touré, just a tremendous play by them when they really desperately needed something to go their way. If he doesn't make that play and Purdue scores, or even if Avery Young doesn't make that play, so I guess I'll have 2 of them. I think it's a completely different game, and Purdue maybe comes back and wins.
And both of those are also coaching adjustments at halftime as well, I would think, at least, certainly to sniff out the screen, as you mentioned. And Shannon even talked about how that was a defensive adjustment by Rob Smith. Sarge, who do you got for us?
Yeah, I think you guys are both missing the most obvious one, and the only right answer is Art Sikowski. I mean, Sikowski is a guy who literally had no idea he was going to start up until kickoff. Comes in, completes his first 5 passes, 8 of his first 10, 2 touchdowns by the end of the first quarter. I mean, just calm. I know the end of the game, they leaned on Johnny Langan, the Johnny Langan package, but they're not even in that position, if it's not for Sikowski, the way he played and, was calm and, he unsung hero. I mean, he was the hero of that game.
You know what I love about Sikowski too? His reaction to Johnny Langan getting that first down late that iced that game. I mean, this is a kid who clearly redshirted last year, could have transferred out, really stayed, bought into it, and certainly from the outside looks like a team first guy. Let's go right to that quarterbacks now. Obviously, Shannon made no qualms about it that if Noah Vedral is healthy, he will start against Penn State this weekend. I think that's the right decision. The way he played against Michigan, we can't forget this offense throwing for 370 yards, complete command of it. Otherwise, what's your gut tell you though, Cratch? I mean, is he going to play? And if he doesn't, is what this offense did against Purdue sustainable another week when it's on film now and they've seen it and Penn State's got more athletes on defense?
My gut is it's got to be 50-50. I mean, you figure if it was right up to kickoff against Purdue, God forbid, unless Vedral does something to re-aggravate his issue, he's going to be closer to play. I don't know if it's sustainable. You're going to continue to use both Art and Johnny if Vedral cannot play, but I don't know if you could necessarily get away with basically Langan playing the entire second half and just running the ball up the middle every time. I think Penn State is going to take that away from you. Penn State, we'll discuss them later, obviously very poor season. They are, I think, second in the Big Ten in pass defense. So, they're not as strong in the run game. But I do think that if Vedral does not play on Saturday again, you're going to have to see more of Art in the second half. I don't think you can kind of lean on Langan so much. And I also think that at some point, there's a sense of predictability in that offense with Johnny. I think that's why the touchdown pass to Cameron Adams is so critical. They had to make teams respect the pass just a little bbit, and now that's on film. But I think that Vedral, I would say, is probably 50-50. If he doesn't play, I think you're going to need more of Art than you did against Purdue.
And that concerns me. And I know you said nice things about him. I agree with you totally, Sarge, especially in the second half where he's telegraphing his throws. When there are a couple of moments in that game where you're like, that could have been picked off. I get it. Certainly the throws to, Shameen early in the game, that just a beautiful touchdown pass. You said in the film review, the only guy on the team who can make that throw. Sarge, I mean, what do you think if it does have to be Sikowski again? How does it change this offense against the defense that, I'm sure is more talented on paper, at least?
Yeah, the more interesting thing I think was him really not utilizing Bo Melton. Bo Melton was a guy who clearly had a pretty big chemistry with Noah Vedral. Had kind of moved into the upper echelon of Big Ten wide receivers, and he was almost invisible this past week. In order to have sustained success, I mean, Sikowski's going to have to find that same type of chemistry. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The other guy in the offense who I don't really have the answer for, why he's been, hasn't been utilized is Isaiah Pacheco. He's a guy who we thought, week one, I think he had 21 touches and, his touches have gone down. His production's gone down as well. I mean, part of it could, just be, the fact that, he hasn't really produced when he, consistently. But, those two guys, I still think are their two best offensive, players. So, I mean, I think they're going to have to get the ball more.
Right, and the fact that they won a game, scored 37 points without either one of them having a big impact does speak to a crazy game. Cratch, really quick on the defense in that game. Again, at halftime, you were thinking that that Purdue was just going to just run up and down the field. Did you leave it feeling better about it? Missed tackles, giving up big plays. I mean, what was your takeaway from what you saw overall defensively?
No, I didn't leave it feeling better. I mean, I think, the defense stepped up in the second half. They did shut down the run. Xander Horvath looked like Brian Leonard out there, in the first half.
He did.
A tremendous game from him. No, I mean, I think that the big key for Rutgers was that they had 3 defensive plays in the fourth quarter. Johnny Langan was the best defense Rutgers had on Saturday.
True.
But look, the tackling is poor, and I got to call it. I ragged on Chris Ash and his staff for poor tackling. It hasn't gotten much better, so far under this, Schiano and Smith and their staff. Now, look, I think obviously the lack of a training camp probably has contributed to that some, but still, you have to tackle better. And I think that you saw Purdue do some things with a mobile quarterback. Obviously, Illinois has done that as well. You saw Purdue do some things in space with screens, with quick hitting plays that Penn State and Maryland and whoever the Champions Week opponent is, they've now got some new angles to kind of expose. And I think the other issue too is that Rutgers defensive line is slowing down a little bit. I think it's because there's not a lot of depth there. I think that a guy like Julius Turner, I've seen a couple weeks now, offensive lines are almost using his quickness against him.
Yeah.
Allowing him to get upfield and then kind of ushering him out of the way. So I think, the linebackers, Fogg and Fatakasi have been great, but they're still kind of looking for a consistent answer at that third spot. I mean, I think the biggest thing, if you're a Rutgers fan, is Young, Melton, Brandon White all went down, all came back in the game. But if they lose 1 or 2 of those guys, they are in deep trouble because the depth is just not there in the second.
Right. I was stunned that White was back as quickly as he was. I mean, it looked like he got shot. He was in severe pain. It looked like it was a wrist injury and something that doesn't. I mean, then he's back in the game. That was sort of an incredible turn there. All right, let's dive into true false. We're going to really do a good preview on Penn State later, of course, because I'm sure that's what everyone's focused on. But as you know, the rules here of true false. I'll hit you with a statement. You tell me true or false, and then we'll discuss it later. All right, ready, guys? True or false? Joshua Youngblood will be the team's biggest impact addition in 2021. Cratch, true or false?
False.
Ooh.
Sarge, in Kansas State,
true.
3 touchdowns. True. All right.
True.
We like that. We'll come back and talk to him because that was a big piece of news that kind of flew in under the radar this week. True or false? 10-point spread. That is way too high for Penn State. Cratch.
True.
Yeah. I mean, Sarge, you said 3 at first. I thought it'd be 6.5, 10. I was surprised by that too. All right.
Yep.
True or false? 4th and 3 from the 50. Schiano was right to go for it at the end of the first half. Cratch.
True.
Ooh. False.
Right. Yes, I saw that in the film review.
I saw that in the film review too.
I thought that was a big false. We'll come back to that because that's such an interesting point. All right. True or false? Clock management is an issue now for Rutgers. Cratch?
True.
Sarge?
False.
I agree with you, Sarge. It seemed like an issue at the end of the first half, but the end of the game was pretty good. We should talk about that. All right. True or false? A 6-win Ohio State team would not belong in the national playoff. Cratch?
It's really kind of tough to say because I don't know what obviously what the rest of the country looks like. Right. I'm going to say false.
Okay. Sarge?
Yeah, false.
False. I agree with false, but they might not get 6 at this rate if Michigan can't play them either. All right. True or false? The pinstripe ball cancellation seals the deal. No bowl for Rutgers. Cratch, true or false?
False.
False.
Sarge? False as well. All right. Interesting. Here's another one. If not for COVID, we'd be looking at a bowl trip right now. In other words, if they had played that original schedule, they would be bowl eligible right now. Cratch.
False.
Okay. Sarge?
False.
It'd be close, though. Those 3 non-conference games look like wins right now. They're based on those teams.
Yep. Syracuse.
Temple, Monmouth. Yep. All right. True or false? The men's basketball team looks better than you even expected. Cratch.
True.
Sarge?
True.
Yeah. I mean, it's a not good competition, but it's been pretty good. All right. And finally, true or false? This quietly was the best weekend for Rutgers in the Big Ten ever. Cratch. True or false?
False. Just because you had 2 national champions in wrestling.
That's true.
You had 2 Big Ten champions. I would say that still's up there. This is a close second, though.
Sarge, you agree?
Yeah, I'll agree with what Chris said.
Yeah, the competition wasn't good. But it's nice to tell. 5 wins in a weekend, 3-0. Women's basketball team 1-1. I mean, that was still a nice night. Sarah Baumgartner tweeted that out. And I was like, yeah, that's a good observation from Sarah. Someone we haven't seen it recently because we're not allowed to go anywhere. Okay, let's go back and review this. So 4th and 3, Cratch. I just hated it. I hated the decision. Got the best punter in the Big Ten. You're at midfield. They had all the momentum. I knew they were going to score the minute they didn't get it, and the play call was crap too. Other than that,
so here's my thing. Like, you deferred the toss. I'm a big fan of the Patriots double up score. So at that point, okay, 4th and 3, you got some time left in the second half. You score here, you get the ball back, you start the second half, you score there. You've got a really good chance to win the game. My issue, and I wrote about this in film reviews, Rutgers has this tendency this year to take like a bold decision and pair it with the most conservative approach ever.
Yeah. That's a good point.
It's all, and my thing is, if you're going to go for it on 4th and 3 from the 50, you've got to trust Art to throw the ball past the sticks and not turn it over. I think it kind of gets back to, it's almost like a reverse of what happened in the Illinois game, where you had a not so bold, approach decision to keep kind of moving the ball closer to field goal range, but you paired it with, let's let the guy who's turned the ball over twice and been reckless throw the ball. It's just kind of a weird thing where I think sometimes they want to be kind of bold and go for it and be aggressive, but they want to mitigate their risk of disaster. And I think that was the big issue there. If they go for it on 4th and 3 there, and they've got a pass play that develops, 5-6 yards down the field, totally different story.
That's true. Sarge, you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I marvel at the fact that, for 2 years, I mean, we almost had like a hashtag created for the surrender punt, the Chris Ash surrender punt. Is the opposite approach, and we're but I just think that
these coaches can't win.
No, but I mean, this is just football, 101. I mean, it got a punt there and play for the second half at that point.
All right. Other things, clock management, I thought it was shaky at the end of the first half, certainly. At the end of the game, though, I mean, once they got that first down, I had not done the math in my head. It was they ran out those final 2 minutes pretty impressively. I mean, what were your thoughts on the clock management, Cratch?
No, I thought at the end of the game it was tremendous. The reason why I said true is just because past few kind of games, Rutgers sometimes seems to get in these positions where they're almost like they're going slow, and then they decide, hey, let's speed it up. It just seems like sometimes they try to go on and off on a drive when you get down to the end of the first half, especially when, are we going to score, or are we just going to take this into halftime? But I thought they were tremendous with the lead on Saturday, obviously, and running that offense with Langen. Yeah.
Right. Okay, a couple more things. Pinstripe Bowl cancellation doesn't seal it for me. What is it? What's left? The Duke's Mayo Bowl, Charlotte, North Carolina. What are the other options?
So there's 5. I believe there's 5 games left. I think it's the Duke's Mayo Bowl in Charlotte, the Music City Bowl in Nashville, the Guaranteed Rate Bowl in Phoenix, Outback Bowl in Tampa, Citrus Bowl in Orlando, and obviously the Big Ten champion, which might be Indiana, will be guaranteed a spot in the New Year's Six. So,
right.
Well, I think the Rutgers is going to be very much in the middle of the pack in the Big Ten, I think. So I still think it's a long shot, just because as long as everyone wants to go to a bowl game like a normal year, which I'm skeptical about. Obviously, you have to think Ohio State, Northwestern, Indiana, Iowa, Wisconsin, all ahead of Rutgers.
Right.
Now, Rutgers could be the next team up, although even like a Michigan is probably ahead of Rutgers at this point. So I think that's the thing. But I also think there's a question of smaller schools, decide not to take their bowl trips. Now, all of a sudden, all these bowls have open spots. I think the biggest question I asked someone, and they said no, is who's going to pay for the testing once you get to a bowl game?
Yeah.
Is it the Big Ten? Is it the school? Is it the bowl? Because it's just when you're not getting to practices, and, the Rutgers is going to play its last regular season game, COVID willing, on December 19th. Do you want to keep all those guys bubbled up past Christmas to go to Charlotte, North Carolina to play Wake Forest? I don't know about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, anything else we have to talk about? Oh, Joshua Youngblood. What an addition this was. Kid from Kansas State. Another blazing speed. 1 week after Aaron Cruikshank returned 100 yards, bringing another gunner. I like the fact that Shannon's still looking for players like that. I got to throw one shout out to Todrick Hunt, though, who had a great feature on another kid in this recruiting class. If you haven't read it yet, go Google the name Shaquan Loyal. It was just a really nice feature about a kid from Newark who everyone thinks is an Alabama-level talent. So I thought that was good. Anything we want to add on that one, fellas?
Yeah, I mean, Youngblood I watched that film. He just looks dynamic. I mean, it kind of reminds me of Greg Schiano early in his first tenure he would do anything for speed, for guys who were fast. And you watch that film, and a Florida kid who just his eye-popping speed, and you clearly see where he wants to go with this. I think he would sacrifice size for speed, at a lot of the positions.
Right, reminds me of another Florida kid, Tim Brown, right? Wasn't he a speedster size? But that would be get a kid like that. That would be certainly really good. All right, let's dive into some Rutgers insider questions. Again, we love when you win now, because all of a sudden we get a lot of subscriptions to NJ.com/insider, and appreciate all of your questions as always. It keeps this show going. And this was a good place to start, because I think if people want to know what's going to have to happen here, what is the winning game plan for the Penn State game? Defense, I would think, has to stop the run and force whoever the quarterback is to beating a passing. Can't let Penn State establish the run game. If they do, I don't think we can win. Cratch, I think it goes back to big plays as well. I mean, what would you say that they have to do to beat Penn State?
I think Rutgers has to establish the run. Because as I mentioned earlier, Penn State is pretty good against the pass. They're kind of bottom, middle of the pack toward the bottom against the run. I think you got to protect the football. That's key. I mean, I think, Penn State is -8 in turnover differential this year. Right. I think it's the worst in the Big Ten. Yeah. So Rutgers is -1, I think. Obviously, they're kind of still living on the success of that 7 takeaway game against Michigan State. But, man, they really have to protect the football. They've got to get away from Penn State. And, look, I think the biggest thing is I know Pete Thamel wrote this in a column at Yahoo over the weekend. Assistant coach told him every week's like a bowl game now. It's just who wants to be there.
Yeah.
I think Rutgers has to show up and want to be there. And I don't really question that Schiano and his staff are going to have this team ready. I mean, this is a monumental opportunity for Rutgers. I don't care what the records are. I don't care about the fact that it's during a pandemic. If you beat Penn State, that is a moment that will be bigger than Purdue, Michigan State, anything. Of
course.
If you beat Penn State by next Friday, there will probably be a photo of you celebrating on the field slapped up in the lobby of the Hale Center. That's a moment that, that people are going to be digging up on YouTube 40 years from now. So I think that's you have to show up and be ready. And I think the fact that obviously I'm sure there was some kind of hesitation, but no real trick plays against Purdue. I'm intrigued to see if Sean Gleason goes out there, no matter who the quarterback is, and just throws everything out there, because this is a moment for Rutgers to kind of establish itself. I thought that 4th and 1 where Michigan, scored the touchdown, I remember sitting in the stands thinking to myself, if they hold here, that's the moment where Rutgers becomes a Big Ten member officially. And I tend to think that that didn't happen. If you beat Penn State, that's the moment when you officially become a Big Ten member. And I think that, obviously people are still going to make jokes about you, but you've kind of established yourself that, hey, Rutgers is here to be a contender, to be competitive in this league.
And this is a great transition to a question from Kevin Fine, a friend, not of the podcast, but a friend, period. I think I can say that, Kevin Fine. Is this week's game against Penn State the most important Rutgers football game in 40 years? I say it is. And he made a great case. I asked him, what are you talking about? I don't know if it's that important, but I did love today in Schiano's press conference when he was talking about remembering the 1988 win and how he was the GA the next year who had to put together the film roll. And the theme of the season was, beat State in 88, because they beat Penn State and Michigan State that year. It certainly, it is the kind of transformational victory if they can get it.
Hi, this is Kara Swisher, and I want to talk to you about my new podcast for the New York Times called Sway. If you want to know what people who hold power in our world are really all about, you need to hear how they answer the tough questions. And that is my specialty. And although it might get messy, as it always does, it's also going to be really fun. You can get Sway wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes are available Mondays and Thursdays.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about it before. I mentioned the 2004 season, 2005, 2006. All those years were littered with those types of wins, and you're just waiting. I didn't think it would be year one, to be honest with you. I didn't think we'd be talking year one about a transformative type victory, but here we are. I mean, Kratch is right. The Purdue game. I'm looking at the fan base is completely and rightfully so excited, but it would be nothing like what it'll be like if they win this game. It'd be huge for recruiting. remember, guys, I mean, recruiting is only, signing day is only, 3 weeks away. So, I mean, can you imagine what that will be like? I'd have to look into the argument that Kevin Fine makes. 40 years is an awfully long time. You're forgetting a lot of big games in in the first Schiano era as well. But
10 years you might.
Look, at some point I talk about this all the time. They're 28-2. Penn State's 28-2 all time against Rutgers.
Yikes.
We remember the '88 game. Kratch is going to write about the 1918 game. Rutgers has never lost to Penn State in the middle of a pandemic. I'm stealing his line, but but we're talking about the two times that they beat them. It's been a long time. So
right.
To get that monkey off their back, to be able to finally beat maybe as Greg Schiano said today, maybe they can establish a rivalry. I mean, it would be huge.
The Dr. Fauci of 1918 talking about wearing masks before that big matchup back then. All right. Another good question about this. A question regardless of what happens on Saturday. Does James Franklin get offered and accept the Texas job this winter? That's fascinating on many levels because that means that former Rutgers coach Chris Ash will be unemployed as well. I didn't realize that was a thing, Cratch. Is that a thing? James Franklin of Texas, or is it just because it's Texas, it's a thing for everybody?
Well, I think there's a couple issues there. One, I think I read, I think Bruce Feldman wrote this, that Chris Del Conte, the Texas AD, who didn't hire Tom Herman, apparently is known to be a big fan of James Franklin.
Oh.
And I think it comes back to this, and I've said this before, I kind of feel like James Franklin, even before this season, the recruiting class isn't very good. They kind of had their moment where they could have beat Ohio State, after, kind of Urban and Ryan Day really got it going, and they didn't. You kind of feel like James Franklin has hit his ceiling at Penn State. But there's really nowhere to – there are very few places to go that you can say are definitively a better job than Penn State.
What about the NFL, though? Right?
Yeah, but, I feel like his NFL moment has passed. And the thing about James Franklin, too, is he's never been thought of as like an X's and O's genius.
Right. Like
Kingsbury or Ryan Day or, So I just kind of think, okay, I've always thought like Auburn would be the place, like if Auburn finally runs Gus Malzahn out of town, that would be a job where James Franklin can go to Auburn and say with a straight face, this is a better job than Penn State, even if it's a lateral move. Texas is a better job than Penn State.
Yeah.
And if they can't get Urban Meyer, which is who they're going to want to get, obviously, I think James Franklin might be their best option. So I could see it happening.
That would be something else. If Franklin and Harbaugh were gone in the same year.
Steve, you asked a question about Chris Ash and like Cratch, who, I'm looking at my text messages over last week. I mean, I think we should open up the floor for Cratch to, talk about the idea that, Chris Ash might be looking for work. Cratch?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm going to be consulting.
Just for Dunleavy's reaction, aren't you? Sorry, that's all you're doing at this point.
I am.
Okay, all right, that's good. As long as we know what our audience is. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Chris, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but here's the thing. If Urban takes the Texas job, Ash is probably staying in Texas. He's the best defensive coordinator in America, according to Urban. So,
yep, we'll see about that.
I'll
take a $10 bet on that one too on the side.
But to what you just said a second ago, Steve, if Harbaugh and I almost feel like, and this is gonna be a crazy take, if you're a Rutgers fan, you would rather Harbaugh and Franklin stay put. Because,
no, that's not really.
Really?
Roll a dice. They get someone who. I mean, Franklin can recruit that. Good football coach.
Well, okay, all right. Well, maybe not so much Franklin, but like, do you really want Luke Fickell and Matt Campbell now at Michigan and Penn State?
All right, well, that's a good.
I mean,
that's a compelling counterpoint. I'll give you that.
That's the thing. That's what you're going to have.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why, Texas might make a move, because they're going to get the best guy on the market this year, no matter what.
Could be. I will say this then, and this is a little off topic, but the last few weeks, if it's ever been more evident just how terrible a football coach Chris Ash was, these last few games, I am sorry. And the other point that goes right, another good segue into a question.
I was going to say, someone actually pointed out to me that, the whole notion that, Greg Schiano was winning with all these, transfers that came in. Noah Vedral didn't play. So this was all of the offense was all of Chris Ash players.
Every single one of them.
Every single one of them.
Every single one of them.
The guys who this coaching staff has made better. They put Arsikowski in positions to succeed. They've Shamin Jones looks like a all Big Ten level type wide receiver. I mean,
amazing.
It is absolutely amazing what they've done with Chris Ash's players.
It is very obvious that wide receiver was just a coaching problem.
Yeah,
coaching and quarterback problem. Can we say quarterback too?
I mean, I think the biggest indictment. I think, Steve, I looked ahead to our notes. I think this is a texter question. I think the biggest indictment of the entire Chris Ash era is the fact that Jay Butler has these guys looking drastically different. And there were 3 months where there was a pandemic, and he was like sending to get some protein bars and some rubber bands and showing him how to do something over Zoom. I just don't understand it because, look, there's a reason why Jay Butler is Shiano's right-hand man, and the reason why they're paying him more than they pay the strength coach at Oklahoma and Georgia. But I can't imagine, I'm sure there's some proprietary training techniques, but for the most part, Western civilization has established how you lift weights and run,
what were they doing? That's great. He talked a good game too, Kenny Parker. What was going on? I don't understand it.
I think he was at Ohio State with a guy,
of course,
who was a renowned strength coach. So it's not like, that's what, like, I almost wonder if it's just a culture thing.
Maybe.
As simple as that, because I'm sure Kenny Parker, he went right back to Ohio State. I talked to NFL players who speak very highly of him. He knew what he was doing, but why did it not translate is just one of the great mysteries of this whole thing.
Yeah, I'm convinced it just all goes back to the top. And that can't be. Just had someone who was not a head coach trying to be a head coach. I just have to assume. And speaking of that, this is a good question. Another transition here. Rutgers had somehow beaten Illinois and Michigan. Would Greg Schiano be frontrunner for Big Ten Coach of the Year? I don't think you needed to get both of them. I mean, you could still. I guess you have to say Pat Fitzgerald. Who's currently
Tom
Allen? Yeah, Tom Allen.
Yeah.
Give me your top five then.
Top five. Tom Allen, one. Fitzgerald. Probably Fitzgerald, and then Greg.
All right, so if Greg goes 4-4 in these games, does that change it? If he's 500 in the regular part of the season,
you can make an argument that he'd be up there at number 2.
And Tom Allen could go in the other direction without Michael Penix Jr., right? I mean that.
Yeah, I would say it's a clear top 3 of Tom Allen, Fitz. Although Fitz won it 2 years ago, so he probably wouldn't get it again. So Tom Allen, Fitz, Greg, I think definitely the clear top 3. Just working my way down that. I mean, Mike Locksley has a chance. Maryland could kind of win 4 or 5 games all of a sudden. Play Rutgers.
The finale between Rutgers and Maryland could help decide this
exactly.
award.
And, Kirk Ferentz, obviously, all the controversy they had in the offseason, I thought they were going to be one of those teams that just tanks, given all the strife they had. And they were 0-2, and that thing was on the verge of falling apart. They've won 4 straight now. I think they may have climbed into the AP Top 25 this week. I'm not sure if they're at the bottom or they got votes. I haven't really had a chance to glance at it yet. But, no, I think that, but it's definitely a clear top 3. Greg is definitely in the top 3. I think there's an argument that he's won.
Right. All right. Look, try to get a couple more. So many on this list. I'm sorry I can't get to all of them. Rick from South Carolina wants to know what's up with the second quarter. Sarge, you asked Schiano about that specifically today. I don't know if you did it to answer Rick in South Carolina.
I did.
You did. All right. So then let's give Rick his answer here. This is really...
I find these types of things fascinating. I mean, I remember asking Chris Ash a question about slow starts. I think it was like 14 games in a row where they did not score on their opening drive. And now they've solved, Greg Schiano and Sean Gleason have solved that problem. But, now all of a sudden, the second quarter is kind of baffling. It's 81, I think, to 29. They've been outscored 16-0 against Purdue. And Greg Schiano, to his credit, said yes. It's a great question. So Rick, great question, and he doesn't really have the answer. They're studying it, but Greg Schiano talks about it all the time. He hates the term halftime adjustments. What did you talk about? Because as he says, you're constantly adjusting. So could it be that they have a ton of energy to start, and then all of a sudden he gets into it, he becomes levels out a little bit. He needs to light the fire a little bit more, maybe. But certainly is going to be something that he's going to try to fix.
This is another Chris Ash segue. We got distracted here, guys. But you remember we would have the press conferences with Chris Ash, where we'd be trying to come up with something to ask other than why do you suck so bad? So the opposite question for Chris Ash might have been, Chris, in the second quarter so far in these 5 games, you've only been outscored by 53 points, which is better than every other quarter. What are you doing successfully in that quarter that you're not seeing? I mean, we would try to come up with questions for these press conferences.
With Jay Neiman too, the defensive coordinator.
Oh my God, that was just torture.
We were at a loss for that.
I'll never forget, I think it was the last Andy Boo press conference, because we mercifully stopped doing those, where I asked him about tackling. He's like, we're getting better. And I was like, well, Andy, it's like October 20th. Like, how is there any better to achieve? Man, it's been a year.
It has been a year, I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. This is the day, Sarge. You went to bed on this night, and you got the text at 1 a.m.
Saying, 12:30. I had just gotten out of Cratchit's car. We made the drive.
Yeah.
And I was at the Woodbridge Center. I pulled off into it and texted it out to our subscribers, tweeted it out, and yeah, it was absolutely. That's
right. You were still working.
It was like 12. I forgot that. That's right. My car was freezing. I was freezing. I was so cold because the car wasn't warm. I just wanted to get home, and the computer wasn't even working at that point. It just was. Yeah. But
I woke up in the morning and I had 432 text messages. I'm like, uh-oh.
I just remember, driving home, because obviously we kind of, it was Sarge, Brian Fonseca, and I, we carpooled. I drove the big rental truck to Penn State. We dropped our cars off at the office in Woodbridge. Just remember driving home just relieved. It was finally over. Because, I mean, Sarge, there were 3 times before that moment where people who should know told us Greg has been hired, and he wasn't hired. So that was a crazy. I was kind of reminiscing, getting ready for the podcast. When they played NJIT at that game, where they had the extra security, and people thought there was going to be a riot,
my God,
everything. The crazy rumors that flew around that week.
I will say this, and you made a good point. I'm not going to call anyone out, but there are some people on my Twitter feed who were and they're dying to wool Rutgers fans, but they took the opposite approach that said that Shiana was overrated, and that you don't need to back up the truck for this guy and move on. And now they have done a complete 180. Shiano is the greatest coach, and I will say, I'm not going to call anyone out, but there are a couple people on my Twitter feed. I mean, I don't know about you, Cratch.
Oh, I mean, people said worse out there. I mean, I'll never forget when I walked into the rack, or I was on a concourse or something, that NJIT game where there was the half a protest outside and everything. There was a fan who came up to me who was like, Greg sucks, we don't need him, blah, blah, blah. And in the day of the press conference, I'm watching looking at the photos and the videos. Obviously, we were all up sequestered in the team room waiting for the arrival. And that guy was literally at the front of the line of the fans, the welcoming party, screaming and cheering, and got a selfie from Greg.
Oh boy!
Just the flip flop of that week was mayhem.
I love it. It was funny, and I was thinking about this is a great thing. As we're getting together, of course, the pandemic has sort of ruined Thanksgiving. I had a very nice Thanksgiving, but I was thinking about what was I doing last year? And I'm like, oh, that's right. This is what I was doing. This the consumed Thanksgiving. I mean, I was looking at my phone for texts as I'm dishing out the stuffing to my in-laws last Thanksgiving.
Brutal.
It's just amazing how that story just took over, and half of it, and we're getting way off base here, but half of it was just getting questions from people who wanted us what are you hearing? That was 90% of the text at that point. It was just a wild few days. All right. Let's dive into the Penn State preview, guys. And this is great. The last Rutgers Insider question wasn't a question. This is Steve P. Another Steve P. writes in to say, hot stuff. You picked the win almost with the exact score. Time to razz Cratch and Keith a little. There you go. I figured we were going down since you were the only beat reporter to predict an RU win. Well, how about that? I got one right for a change. It has not been a good mere picking.
Homer say what?
Yeah, Homer said exactly. Yes, in case you did. Yeah, right. Homer Politti got this one to improve to 2-4, I think, against the spread this year. Who's going to be the homer this week? Penn State, 10-point favorites. Haven't beaten them since '88, and before that, since '18. Cratch, you want to go first? Since I know who you're picking.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen. Woo. I think this is going to be. It's kind of weird because obviously there's not going to be anyone there and everything, and it's unfortunate. But like, this is going to be not the biggest win in school history by far, but it's going to be one of the more cathartic ones. I think one of the more joyful ones. Mm-hmm. I just think that it's just hard for me to believe, given everything that's going on, given the state of the season, given the fight this team has shown, that. Greg talks about how this is a 1-game season. This is the season. Yeah. So I will say Rutgers. I think it's going to be a lot lower scoring than we expect. I will say Rutgers 26, Penn State 25.
Wow.
Weird game, crazy game. Rutgers wins. And, they've got a moment that they can kind of immortalize.
Sarge, you going in the same direction? What's your pick?
Completely agree. I think Rutgers is going to win this game. Wow. I think I might have said it 2 weeks ago too. 24-21 Rutgers. I agree. I don't think it's going to be a huge scoring game, but I think Rutgers is going to win the game.
Wow. All right. I hate to be going the other direction this week. I'm just not quite there. And again, it was just watching that Michigan game, and you just recognize how much talent they have. I'm still a little concerned with the Rutgers defense. Wish the quarterback situation was a little more settled. Look, they're just ahead of schedule no matter what you do. The fact that we're even talking about this is a great testament to where it's going. I think it's going to be something like 28-20 Penn State victory. But we'll have a low-scoring game, and it'll be a fun game, certainly. So that's good. All right, what else we got to talk about? Basketball? Want to dive in a little bit?
A great start for Rutgers.
Yeah,
great start.
You lose Geo Baker, and they still,
obviously, Geo notwithstanding, of course.
Right. They still 3-0. The thing I'm worried about from the basketball standpoint is you're 3-0 and you're not playing again until December 8th. I don't understand why they wouldn't try to get a game in this week.
Well, I'm fired up for aren't they playing Seton Hall this week? I know Seton Hall was looking for a game.
Wow.
I stopped. Seton Hall was looking for a game this week. I don't know if they got one, Cratch.
They're going to play Oregon and Omaha because they couldn't get Texas Tech and Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Like, that didn't work out for them. And then
about Cratch's tweet about this today. This is great because this is good background, folks. If you don't understand, like, Cratch, he's not one of those people who stirs it up on social media. So before he sends out this tweet to needle the to Seton Hall fans, he sends it to us, to Sarge and I, as if one of us are going to – no, Cratch, show some restraint here. Of course.
When have we ever been –
Of course we want you.
To nope.
Right. Of course we're going to say – I'm sure, Cratch, send that tweet out. We're going to stop you?
The only thing I was proud of is Politti didn't take it for himself. It was – come on. Like, of course.
I should have just cut and pasted it into my Twitter feed. So his tweet was they're playing where was it? Chechnya?
Chechnya, yeah.
Chechnya. That's a good one. That's a good. That Seton would rather play in Chechnya than play Seton Rutgers. That is a good. You got a lot of mean tweets back at you for that.
Yeah, all 19 Seton Hall fans in my mentions
coming at you.
No, I was gonna say, I guess they couldn't get a game in Vietnam or something. So they're just gonna.
Yeah.
But all kidding aside, like. And I'll be like, Willard said he's holding his date in January, February. It's like, brother, we're not going to get to January or February at this rate, And if we do, you're going to have so many conference games postponed that there's going to be no wiggle room. You've got to play the game now. And I just don't understand why. And look, I know they're flying, why crisscross the country during a pandemic when you can just have Rutgers get on the bus and drive up.
It makes no sense. To a hotspot, no less.
To a hotspot. Makes no sense. Absolutely no sense. You know, it boggles the mind.
Right. So, and I get it. The fans are saying, well, we're not ducking them. We're playing these teams. Well, there's a different definitions of the word duck. Like you clearly do not want to play Rutgers. I'm not saying you don't want to play them because you think they're too good. For whatever the reason might be, if you want to play the game, you play the game. Right? Exactly.
I mean, you don't have to really do anything to play the game. You literally have to call and say, hey, let's play the game in 2 days. Boom.
Yeah.
Right.
Pikel said after the game yesterday, they're looking for a game. So it's.
Yeah.
I will say this though: if Rutgers cannot get Seton Hall, they should call Iona, because Rick P in the rack would be very enjoyable.
That'd be fun. Absolutely. I see that Mike Bray was looking for a game since someone pointed out that Mike Bray, who tried to cancel the entire Rutgers program at one point, that'd be a fun one to a little rematch there. Sure. Bring Notre Dame to the rack. Overall though, I mean, Sarge, you've seen a lot of Rutgers basketball teams.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the freshmen. I think that, so far, just Ron Harper Jr. looks like he's an all Big Ten type player.
Yeah.
And for me, it comes down to Young and his ability to get to the basket. And he's so far, he looks like he's doing that in spades. So what do you think?
Yeah. You mentioned that Young is going to be the type of guy. I think, as of now, their next game would be Syracuse, right? And Syracuse, right. What are they known for? The zone. Mm-hmm. They're going to need a guy to pierce the zone, and Young is going to be the guy. He's going to be the X factor in that game for sure. But the Geo Baker injury, the fact that they've been able to win those games, without him, really just speaks to the depth of the program. Kind of what Steve Pikel has been building toward, and now here we're at that. This program, isn't about Geo Baker is the start of the program. His number will be retired someday. It'll be up in the rafters, but they can survive without him.
Yeah. Another culture thing, Kretsch. The fact that Geo Baker is there at the rack, he seems like he's coaching from the sidelines. He's giving Paul Mulcahy, tips. I mean, you can see it on TV, and that he's involved in every one of these huddles. That speaks to that team's cohesiveness too.
No, I mean, I think Sarge hit the nail on the head. I mean, Geo Baker is a Rutgers icon, still playing in front of us at this point. And, I obviously you hope he gets back as soon as he can. I will say, remember last year he broke the thumb, and I think it was only 3 games. Obviously there was, more time in between then. He got back quickly. So, although it seemed like he maybe came back a little bit too quick. So my guess is that Rutgers will keep that in mind. But no, definitely. I mean, I think he's a big asset for them, whether he's on the court or not.
Okay. All right, guys, let's do it. I appreciate everyone sending in questions. Thanks again. This is going to be a fun week. Rutgers, Penn State. We'll be back next Monday to talk about what Kratch and Sarge believe is a transformational victory. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you then.
Acast powers some of the world's best podcasts. Here's a show we recommend.
Hello, everyone. I'm Danny Pellegrino.
I'm Jenna Brister.
And we are back for season 2 of a very merry, iconic podcast. We're going to be diving into your favorite holiday movies, recapping them, and going on a few tangents.
Yes, and it's the end of the world as we know it. So why not close out 2020 with a bunch of episodes of Holiday Recap with us?
So we hope everyone grabs a cup of eggnog.
And a fistful of candy.
Cook that bird in the oven.
Doritos. We don't care what you're into. Just join us.
Grab your bed wine. Grab your couch cocoa. We're getting lit on the holiday movies. We'll be doing 10 recap episodes. So subscribe to A Very Merry Iconic Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and find us on social media at A Very Merry Iconic Podcast on Instagram, and we'll have all the updates there.
Acast recommends.